PFL announces Francis Ngannou's long-awaited return to MMA. The former UFC heavyweight champion will fight PFL boogeyman Renan Fereira for the PFL heavyweight title, kicking off PFL's inaugural Super Fights pay-per-view on October 19th. Former UFC flyweight contender Muhammad Mokaev posted a cryptic photo this morning, leading MMA fans to believe he has found a new promotion. And lastly, Dana White's Contender Series kicks off next week on August 13th. So later on in the show, we will be joined by Wesley Schultz, who will be headlining week 1. But first, we are joined by our field correspondent, our official reporter. I don't know what to call you yet, but Michael Owens has joined us. How are you, Mike?
I'm very well, Jesse. How are you?
Doing great. Happy to have you. Thank you for joining me. This is for those who don't know, Mike is on board with us full time now, doing reporting. You were just at UFC 304. Before we get into the topics, just sort of give us what was that experience like for you, being able to cover a big UFC pay-per-view like that and all the interviews you got?
It was fantastic. It was a very busy 12 to 18 hours.
Yeah.
But it was good. There was a lot of people on that card who I've interviewed this virtually. So it was nice to meet up with people, the likes of Arnold Allen, Nathaniel Wood, Owen Elliott, and a couple more. So it was a nice experience to see some of the guys. And I think we've done pretty well in terms of the Brits. We got some good results on the board, a loss in the main event and a couple of other losses here and there. But I think we've done pretty well overall.
Yeah, I was texting you about that because the guys that we interviewed, they were like 4-0 or 5-0 leading up until later on. Owen Elliott was like was the standout for me. He looked great. So I was happy to see that. Oh, by the way, this episode of the Fight Season podcast is brought to you by DraftKings. Do not forget to check out we've got a great promo code, so I'm going to be talking about that later in the show. But let's get right into it here. Francis Ngannou, the big news of the week so far is that Francis Ngannou will be back. He is officially making his return to MMA in the PFL. He signed in the PFL, God, feels like it was over a year ago at this point. Was it a year ago?
I believe it was about last June, if memory serves, June 2023.
Yeah. So it's been a while. Obviously, he's had 2 big-time boxing fights. He's coming off of getting knocked out by Anthony Joshua in the boxing ring. He's going to be taking on the guy that a lot of people are calling the PFL boogeyman right now, Renan Fereira. Before we sort of get into our feelings about the matchup, just in terms of our general feelings about Francis making his return, it's obviously amazing to see him back. But, you know, what he's been through as a person over the past year and how much he's accomplished as a fighter, how he went from being like, obviously his public feuding with Dana White, fans believing he fumbled the bag, to where he is now. What are your feelings about having Francis back in the octagon or the cage?
Incredibly happy. I mean, it's been nice to see him go over and do fulfill his dreams, if you will, over in the boxing circles, and to get those 2 huge fights against Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, which in many ways not only cements his legacy, but obviously add a new dimension to what he's already done in combat sports. So massively happy to see him back. I've had some contact with the likes of Eric Nixick and Danny Ige over in his gym, and despite the very bad news that he received earlier on this year regarding his son, I do hear that he's in good spirits, and just wishing him the best. I think he's one of those fighters where the sport is better when Francis Ngannou is involved.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of comments about how you don't want to face Francis Ngannou now because he's maybe more motivated than he's ever been. He actually made a comment yesterday on a podcast. I apologize. I forget the name of it, but he said that everything he's been through over the last year with his child and everything, that he was considering retirement at one point because of what he was going through, which is totally expected, to be honest. But he actually said he sort of turned it into a positive, and it's motivated him to keep fighting. So very, very happy to have him back. But, you know, he is coming off of getting pretty badly knocked out in his last fight. Obviously, he got the big payday, so it was a major success in terms of his career. But in terms of, you know, how it affects him in the cage, going back into MMA after such a long layoff, there are some concerns about it. Odds makers have Francis as a heavy favorite, -345. So the odds makers are expecting this to be a Francis Ngannou fight. But Renan Fereira is no joke. You might have better insight into this, because I don't follow the PFL as closely as I do UFC, but I do follow the big fights. And everything I've seen of Renan Fereira is that he is a real live dog here. I mean, I almost feel like the odds might be incorrect in some ways,
Mm.
just because people don't know who he is yet.
I feel like there's an element of that, and I feel like relative to what Francis could get in terms of a fight outside of the UFC in the heavyweight division, this is the best option. I mean, naturally, he's as if not more intimidating than Francis with his 6'9" frame. You
Yeah.
can't get much more intimidating
Yeah.
than Francis, but you know, it does feel like the best option for the moment with Francis, and I do kind of agree. I do think there is a certain element of a live talk in this fight, and I do feel like, and what I hope as well is win, lose, or draw for Francis. I hope that Renan Fereira throughout the build up gets the respect that he deserves as a credible opponent. Because what would be the worst is if Francis does what he does to most people and knocks him out in the first minute, and then suddenly he doesn't get the respect he deserves, and we start hearing terms like cans bandied around. So let's hope that on October 19th, win, lose, or draw, Francis Ngannou gets the respect for stepping back into the smart cage in this instance, but the cage more generally.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, it's not even on the flip side of that, if Francis loses, it's not the worst thing in the world for PFL at all, because this is what one championship sort of tried to build their brand off of, was like bringing in a guy like Sage Northcutt, was that he loses badly in his debut, but it was actually good for ONE FC in some regard because it validates the guys that you have
Yeah,
on your roster.
yeah,
So it absolutely would validate Renan Ferreira, and I agree. I do think it needs to be a good fight. He needs to have a good showing for it to be a justifiable matchup. Because you're right, fans will obviously start throwing around the term can and everything like that. But do you think that he's a dangerous opponent for Francis to be taking after such a long layoff? Because that seems to be the talking point here, is that maybe he's a little too dangerous. But then again, Francis Ngannou was UFC heavyweight champion, and he's fought some of the most dangerous guys in the world. So you can't really throw him in against a guy that's unproven, right? This is
yeah.
kind of the only option that they had.
This is a litmus test for Francis in terms of where he's at after the Anthony Joshua loss, and obviously the personal tragedy. It's also a litmus test in terms of where Renan Ferreira's at, because if everybody's saying that he's the best guy in the heavyweight division, not named Francis Ngannou, then this is his ultimate moment to prove that and to get the biggest scalp of his career. So, in answer to your question, I think it's probably the right about matchmaking. There's also an element of once you increase your star power as much as Francis has over the last year, you can't fight somebody nobody's heard of. You've got to obviously have the biggest name available to you. So, in answer to your question, it feels about right, and I'm kind of comfortable with where the odds are in terms of. I feel like this is a fight that Francis should win, but we should
Yeah.
credit Renan Ferreira as a very real opponent.
Absolutely. And it's the inaugural PFL Super Fights pay-per-view. So this will be their big test in terms of the success of pay-per-view sales and everything. Hopefully it attracts more fighters too, that maybe couldn't find a home at the UFC, that they can bring in
Mm.
some like big stars. But or maybe we'll just have to see Jake Paul fight somebody in MMA at some point. Because
We,
that's
we've seen it.
yeah,
We've seen a lot of guys on the sideline since the champion versus champion showing in February. So the likes of AJ McKee, Aaron Pico, and people like that haven't fought since that card. So I would imagine that, and from my conversations with PFL fighters, it feels like PFL give their athletes the option to either fight in the regular season or to fight on the super fights division, and it was they had one in mind for each of their fighters. So expect some of the bigger names on the PFL and Bellator rosters to be appearing on
there
October
you go.
19th.
We're going to move on to the next topic, but first we have a message from our friends over at DraftKings. We'll get back to the video in just a second, but first I got to tell you about an offer that we got going on with our friends over at DraftKings. Right now, if you're a new DraftKings customer, you can just go download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. You bet $5 on anything, literally anything, and you get $150 of bonus bets instantly using our promo code Inside Fighting. And if sports betting isn't yet available in your state, it's not a big deal. You can always go play DraftKings Daily Fantasy Sports, get in on the fun there. It's actually my favorite thing to do in DraftKings. So once again, if you're a new customer, go download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, bet $5 on any bet, get $150 of bonus bets instantly using promo code Inside Fighting. All right, so Muhammad Mokaev posted a photo earlier today of a pair of gloves that were made by the company Top 10. In the caption of his post, it says "New gloves, but same goal." Now, for people who don't know, the company Top 10 is actually the glove supplier for Brave FC.
Mm.
And so fans are obviously already speculating that Mokaev will be fighting for Brave at some point. This is one of the crazier stories that I can remember, just in terms of a guy that was one of the most highly touted top prospects. Obviously, he's a flyweight. We know what's going on in that division, but it's a little bit unfortunate that this is where this guy is at, because he just won a huge fight at UFC 304, which felt like a title contender fight, to be honest. That felt like the winner of that fight was probably getting either Kopp or Mokaev was getting a title shot. What are your thoughts on him potentially going over to Brave, first of all, and the potential that maybe he will make a reunion with the UFC at some point? What's your general overall feel of this situation?
Well, it's first of all, it's twofold. It's important to remember that Mokaev's early career was spent in Brave, so that would technically be a return to
Right.
his regional promotion, if you will. The second point, I'm going to go out on a limb and say something here, Jesse, and I'm interested to get your thoughts, but I am going to predict that Muhammad Mokaev's next fight is with the UFC.
You know, that's really interesting, because UFC loves to play their leverage points at any sort of negotiation that they have. We saw Ray Sefo saying, of PFL president Ray Sefo saying that the rumors about them signing Mokaev are true because he's reportedly like a pain in the ass to deal with, which might be true. He might be difficult, might be something to do with his team, might be something to do with him. We don't know. We're not in on the inner circle, but I'm not sure if it's going to be the next fight, but I do believe Mokaev will be back in the UFC, because the guy's got like 1.8 million followers. Everything that I've posted in terms of like covering this story, the fans have been very receptive to it. He seems to have a large fan base. And I just don't believe that's something that you give up on when a kid is 23 years old. Maybe you're playing your leverage points and you're trying to there's obviously some sort of contract negotiation thing going on here, but you're trying to get whatever you can out of the negotiations. So it's possible that Mokaev is going to fight one more fight, but the fact that you think that he might fight his next fight in the UFC, I don't think it's as crazy as you might think, because he's literally winning big fights in the UFC. The UFC has dealt with like pains in the ass before. I mean, they have Conor McGregor on the roster. They're having trouble getting him a fight, and they're still trying to get it. I don't expect that Muhammad Mokaev will never fight for the UFC again. I think that it's very likely he will be back.
There's 2 points to mention here, which is in terms of star power that you brought up then. I think Mokaev has around about 1.8 million. It's around about the same for Leon Edwards.
Right.
So the best fighter to come out of England or the UK has around about the same Instagram following as Muhammad Mokaev. Now, I know we can't base everything on that, but in terms of star power, that's a very big metric in terms of what Muhammad Mokaev brings. The second point, as you mentioned, is there isn't really a massive home for the flyweight division internationally. I mean, Rise and do a lot of good things over there, but I can't quite envisage Muhammad making a move over to Rise. And PFL don't have a 125-pound division, so it feels to me like this could be a negotiation tactic from the UFC. Then not only maybe put Mokaev in his place, but also to just devalue him just a little bit and remind him who's the boss. I mean, I don't know if you saw the deleted interview from MMA Junkie that released last week that was subsequently released, the headline of which said that was from Muhammad Mokaev, who said that he'd called Hunter Campbell and said he'd fight his next fight for free.
Right.
I mean, if that isn't a sign that Muhammad is desperate and needs to improve his relationship with the UFC, then I don't know what is. So, going to go on a limb and say I think his next fight will be in the UFC. He might be, it might be a fight lower down the rankings. He might lose his top 15 place as a measure from the UFC to show him who's boss. But if I have to hazard a guess, I'd say that's where he fights next.
Yep, I tend to agree, and maybe that photo that he posted this morning was just his way of maybe scaring the UFC into making a better offer or something. Who knows? But anyways, we have got Dana White's Contender Series, Wesley Schultz. He'll be making his. I just buried the lead there. Wesley Schultz, MMA fighter, making his debut on Dana White's Contender Series next week, and he is joining us right now. Dana White's Contender Series starts next week, and we have got the man who will be headlining the main event, fighting for a UFC contract, Wesley Schultz. How are you, sir?
I am doing great.
Yeah. So, what are your emotions like heading into this? You're going to be fighting in front of UFC brass. It's your big opportunity to fight for a chance at a UFC contract. Just give us your overall emotions heading into this.
Man, I'm just pumped up to get in there and fucking scrap, man. I mean, training's fun. Like I have a really good time with it, but the worst part about this sport is you never really get to compete that much. At max, like 3, 4 times a year. So being able to actually get in there and like feel like I'm an athlete, 99% of the time I just feel like I'm a fucking you know, wood on service industry worker. And there's like 3 nights a year I can fucking do the whole, you know what I mean? Three times a year I can fucking jump in there and do what I claim to do. You know what I mean? Be a fighter.
Right.
When was last time you had a fight on a Tuesday night, Wesley?
Fuck. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Like I have a wonky schedule as it is.
Mm.
Like I'm usually working Friday, Saturdays, and most of the time I gotta check my phone to see what day it is.
Mm.
So I'm not really tethered to a Monday through Friday schedule. So I mean that helps.
That's really interesting the way you put it about how you only fight 3 times a year. Is that something that it does it make it hard to sort of like stay locked in because of the fact that you're only able to perform, publicly 3 times a year?
Yeah,
Obviously, you have your teammates, everybody knows what you do on a daily basis, right? But that's a small circle.
yeah.
Does that make it
Like
hard to lock in?
sometimes, like if you went for 3 jogs a year, you wouldn't call yourself a runner,
Right.
you know. Uh, and just like missing events and stuff while you're in camp, basically, and fights can pop up out of nowhere. So there's times you have trips planned. It's like fuck, you gotta cancel those, or maybe someone's wedding will be like 30 weeks before the fight. So like, okay, I guess I'm DD this event yet again.
Right. Um, you're going to be performing in front of Dana White, all the big UFC brass. Do you feel how you feeling about that, like pressure? Because this is obviously the most pressure you've ever felt, I imagine, or just the most expectation maybe that you put on
Yeah.
yourself. Just what is that feeling like, knowing that you're going to be fighting in front of Dana White and all the people that make the big decisions at the UFC?
Part of it seems a little surreal. Just like I remember starting doing this like a little over 5 years ago. And it's crazy to be finally like at this point. Like we've had people getting ready for the fights on these contender series before. Well, I've been in the gym and it's just always seemed like something like, oh, in the future, in the future, in the future. Well, now it's next week.
Yeah. Um, I'm sure Mike is going to have some questions for you as well, but this is one I really wanted to ask. And you're in a unique situation because a lot of people watch Dana White's Contender series. A lot of the UFC fans are really into it, but it's an opportunity for them to watch fighters that they've never met before, never heard of before. For people who don't know you, just sort of give a brief summary of like why you believe you belong in the UFC and why they should expect from you going forward.
Well, first off, I think I have the skills. You can only beat up regional dudes for so long before you should be moving on to a bigger promotion. Uh, and so I think the time's right with that. And the UFC is looking for guys that get in and want to fight. And I always show up to fight. I've never been in a boring fight. At least I don't think so. I think I'm fucking awesome. But uh, yeah, so I got the product, and the UFC's that's what they're in the business of putting on, not just competitive but exciting fights, and I think I bring all that to the table.
For those who haven't watched you fight before, can you give us a little insight into what your style is or how you like to express yourself when you're in the cage?
Well, I like to do scrambly jujitsu from the bottom, dominant wrestling on top, but I'm never really just sitting on top. I'm always working something. whether it's position, elbows, ground and pound. I just got a ground and pound knockout in the first round of my last fight. Uh, I'm not afraid to let some things marinate, but I'll also do, I'm not afraid of getting taken down. So, I'll do dumbass kicks. I've I think a few times in my amateur career, I went for a high kick and just slipped on my ass. And you know what? But I don't give a shit because I don't mind fighting from bottom. Some people are scared of getting put in certain positions in the cage, and I'm really just not. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does make sense. Do you feel any extra pressure to like go for finishes or submissions or knockouts, knowing that that's probably what gets everybody knows that's what gets you a contract in the UFC if you have an amazing finish at the Contender Series? Or are you just going to stick to your game plan?
If anything, I feel like a dog let loose off the leash, because you always have to think about, if you try something big and then you get fucked up from it, you look like a dumbass. But I have that my built-in excuse, brother. It's Contender Series. You got to go for the sick finish. So I can do whatever the fuck I want. You know what I mean? And as long as as long as I'm into working for a sweet finish, whatever happens, man.
So in your mind, it's more important to be entertaining than it is to get the finish.
For this fight, absolutely. Yeah. Like if sometimes in the future, some guys going with like a 15-50 contract. Okay, yeah, get the fucking win, man. But this is a job interview, and I just gotta put my best self forward if that makes sense.
I spoke to Therese Finney. He's also a middleweight. He's going to be fighting the week after you, I believe. He was on Contender Series last year. He got a finish. And he's still undefeated. But Dana White told him, we don't believe you're ready yet. So he had to go back. He had to go through the motions all over again. He's coming back, most likely with a win. He's in. But you're right. They've given out contracts to people who have lost fights just as often as they do people that get like decision wins.
Yeah.
So
it almost feels like a decision is a draw, and neither of us is gonna win with if either of us goes to decision, unless it's like a bun. But
right. What are so you're obviously you're fighting for a contract, but you have to have like a vision for your future in a career. What are some of your dream fights in the UFC? Like if you're able to get a contract, like what's one of your dream fights?
Are you talking about like who I'm fighting or the way like
yeah, like do you have like a particular opponent that like you've always wanted to fight, or do you not think in those terms?
Well, I feel like the entry level, I'm gonna say entry level middleweights are never really shown off. And I never get off work until like the last 3 fights are on Saturday night cards. So I'm really not too familiar with the middleweight class outside of like the top 15. And
right.
I don't want to say shit as fuck don't want one of those right off the bat, but if your first fight's like a top 15 guy, you're probably getting called in on like 2 days notice to fill in, you know what I mean?
Right.
Can I ask what it is you do for work?
I bartend.
Bartend.
Yep.
Do you like it, or is the hope one day to
no, I dig it. I'll keep doing it after this. I just fucking run my mouth the whole time. Have a great time.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, do you allow yourself to think what a win on Tuesday and getting that UFC contract does for you, not only in your career but also maybe in your wider life as well?
Oh, what it would do for me? Well, I mean, part of it would vindicate me not doing a regular job the last 5 years. I graduated university and just say, hey, parents, I'm gonna move to Milwaukee, work a service industry job, and train fucking sweet martial arts moves with the hope that someday it'll pay off. Like that's not like a great long-term plan. But with a win on Contender Series, that could be the first step in maybe showing that I've made the correct decision. And if not, fuck it, I'm still a fighter.
I'm sorry, did you say, do you have a degree?
Yeah.
Well, what's your degree in, out of curiosity?
It's a geography major with a biology minor and a concentration in environmental science.
Love that. That's
I
awesome.
mean,
So out of curiosity, with your bartending job, how often do you have to do your clientele? Does your clientele know what you do on the side? And do you ever have to use your skills with like rowdy drunk
no,
patrons?
I don't. I'm lucky. I'm lucky. My spot serve food, and the more like restaurants.
Yeah,
So
okay.
they're closed by like 10 at night usually, which is nice. Like I've worked in like bars before, and man, restaurant bartending, like you're not getting fucking spit on and cussed at by drunk sons of bitches. It's a lot more tame,
Right.
which is nice.
Love
And that's
that.
that's in Milwaukee, did you say?
Yeah,
So is that where are you training out of?
Pura Vida.
Right, okay.
All right, since you're obviously you're in the middleweight division, just curious, what are your thoughts on Izzy versus DDP next week for UFC 305? Who do you got in that fight?
Man, that's for the fucking former champ versus the fake champ, man. I don't give a shit about what happens in that fight.
Why do you say fake
What makes
champ?
you call Drickus the
Yeah.
fight champ?
Yeah, he's fucking what was it? I think Sean won that last fight.
Dana White agrees with you. A lot of fans agree with you on that one.
Yeah. So I don't know, this is for the fraudulent belt. Although if I saw either one of them in person, I'd probably be like, man, go get that fucking belt next week. Probably change my tune really quick.
Right.
Do you think Sean gets the winner? I mean, we've just seen Robert Whittaker matched up against Hamzat Chimaev. He felt like the other front runner for the middleweight
Yeah, I don't
title.
know. That's tough. I think I'm not sure the timeline of all this. I'd have to look at, like, you know what I mean? Like if they're happening within like a week of each other. Or if is that Hamzat fight after DDP?
Hamzat Whittaker is 308, so that's the 27th of October.
And DDP is he's next week?
Yeah. So what's
Okay,
about
I
6,
think
7 weeks difference.
yeah, okay. I think Sean probably gets it then. Because you have to wait for that 308 to conclude, and then you have to give him like another 3 months. So that's more likely.
Yeah,
Like Izzy fights a lot when he was a champion, right?
this is the longest layoff of his career.
Yeah. So I mean, he'd want to get back in the DDP. I don't know.
But before that, Izzy was like one of the most active champions in
He
the UFC.
was underappreciated.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining me, man. This is something I like to do. This is my own little fun segment. Just I want to give people a little insight into how you view your favorite fighters in MMA. So I want you to build the perfect fighter with me. So we have 5 categories. We have grappling, we have striking, we have power, we have fight IQ, and oh god, what was the other one? I'm blanking on it. Grappling, striking, fight IQ. Let's do 4. Build a perfect fighter. Grappling, striking, fight IQ, and power.
Okay, shit. Power. I'm going Ngannou.
There you go.
Then you said striking's one.
Striking.
Ooh. Cody Garbrandt versus Dominic Cruz. That specific Cody Garbrandt. Grappling. Let's do. I'd say, fuck. I want to think of like a defensive grappler, just keep it on the feet, you know. I think with what we've built with the first 2, you don't even really need to go to the ground. So who doesn't really get taken down?
Holloway.
You know,
I thought Sandhagen did pretty well against Umar, but even though he lost the fight, his defensive grappling was pretty good.
I didn't watch that, but I heard that was a really good fight.
Yeah.
Maybe Strickland? He doesn't get. Does he
tough
not get taken down? He's pretty good takedown defense, right? Does he
He's
just
never
fight
really been
strike?
he's never really been taken down and controlled since the Kamaru fight. That was like 2015, 16.
Okay, we'll do that. Strickland takedown defense. And then
Fight
What
IQ.
was the last one? Fight IQ? Shit. Damn. Maybe Bilal.
I like that.
That. Although I don't get why he took him down that first round. It looked like Leon had like the 1,000-yard stare and went for the takedown. I mean, it worked out well.
Yeah.
But,
Sorry, go ahead.
oh yeah, I was freaking out when that happened. I was like, what the fuck?
Right. I remember the 5th category, cardio. Best top cardio.
Oh shit. Probably Umar. Or shit. I'm thinking one of these little guys that shoots all the maybe Marab shooting like a million takedowns.
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to be exhausting. Oh, if you're just a little fella, like you can't be using too much energy.
Yeah. Dude.
I'd like to see someone over 185 try that. They'd probably have a fucking cardiac arrest in the cage.
Oh man. Well, Wesley, thank you so much, man. Appreciate your time. Just before we go, where do you see yourself a year from now? Obviously, you got a big opportunity coming up next week. Where do you want to see yourself a year from today?
In the UFC, ideally with 2 fights under my belt in the UFC. I don't know, maybe Brazil on a sweet fight card or something. I don't know. Anyway, I want to win this next week and then get some fights with crowds.
Yeah,
I love fighting for crowds. Like that was my only hesitancy or whatever about Contender Series is it's kind of in like a big box.
right.
But yeah, that's why I see myself.
Is there a
Right
destination?
after the fight, yeah.
Is there a destination or a stadium or a country that like there's a bucket list for you that you want to fight in?
Oh man, Florida doesn't have. I believe Florida doesn't have income tax, so maybe Florida. And I think flights down there are pretty cheap, and you have to buy. So I'd save money on flights for 2 of my coaches. 'Cause I think they give you 1 flight for 1 coach, and yeah, I think that'd be maximizing my payout, and it's Florida. It's a good time.
That is a very smart one. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that seems like a Midwestern fucking answer to me.
It is. Strickland, though, he said how he had to fight his last 2 fights, and one of them was in Australia, and then the other one was in Canada. So he's lamented about how much he's had to pay on income tax in his last 2 fights.
Yeah,
so
the Commonwealth doesn't.
Yeah,
they don't hold back.
Right. Well, Wesley, best of luck, man. Fighting on Dana White's Contender Series Week 1 main event. Best of luck, and we'll be rooting for you. All right.
Hell yeah! Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. All right. Best of luck, man.